The house did not appear on any map. Evan discovered this only after he had already crossed the rusted cattle gate and followed the dirt road for nearly a mile, the trees pressing closer with every step. His phone showed a blank square where the property should have been. No address, no parcel lines, no satellite image. Just gray. He told himself that old places fell through the cracks all the time. The house stood at the end of the road, leaning slightly, as if tired. Its windows were dark despite the early evening light, and the porch sagged under its own weight. A hand-painted sign hung crookedly from a nail by the door. Room for rent, no phone number, no name. Evan knocked. The sound felt wrong, too flat, like knocking on something hollow. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened a few inches. A woman stood behind it, thin, pale. Her eyes reflected light like glass beads. "You're late," she said. Sorry," Evan replied, confused. "I'm here about the room." She studied his face for a long moment, then opened the door wider. "You'll do." Inside, the air smelled damp and old, like wet paper. The walls were lined with photographs, hundreds of them. Families, couples, single faces. All of them stared directly at the camera. All of them wore the same faint, strained smile. "Are these previous tenants?" Evan asked. "Yes," the woman said. "Most of them." That should have been his cue to leave. Instead, he followed her down the hall. The room was small but clean. A bed, a desk, a mirror bolted to the wall. "Rules are simple," she said. "Do not leave your room after midnight. If you hear knocking, do not answer. And if you see someone who looks like you, do not speak to it." Evan laughed nervously. "That's a joke, right?" Her expression didn't change. "Midnight," she repeated, and left. That night, Evan lay awake listening to the house breathe. He couldn't explain it any other way. The walls expanded and contracted with a soft, wet sound. At exactly 12 a.m., the air went still. Then came the knocking. Slow, careful, directly on his door. "Evan," a voice whispered. His voice, his heart hammered, as the handle turned slightly, testing. He squeezed his eyes shut and didn't move. After a long minute, the knocking stopped. The next morning, he found a new photograph on the wall in the hallway. It was him. Same clothes, same face, same strained smile. "I didn't take that," he told the woman. "Of course you didn't," she said calmly. "It did." That night, the mirror in his room fogged over on its own. Words appeared, traced from the other side. "Let me in." He backed away, shaking. The reflection smiled even though he didn't. On the third night, Evan broke the rules. He heard screaming. Someone else's voice, desperate and real. He opened his door. The hallway was longer than it should have been, stretching into darkness. At the far end stood a figure hunched over, sobbing. As it lifted its head, Evan saw his own face staring back, eyes wrong, mouth too wide. "You took my place," it said. "Now I need yours." He ran. The front door slammed shut before he reached it. The walls peeled back, like skin, revealing layers of faces beneath, all whispering, all familiar. The woman stood behind him. "The house must stay full," she said gently. Evan screamed as hands dragged him backward, pulling him into the walls, into the photographs, into the mirror. The next morning, the sign outside was freshly painted. "Room for rent." Inside, a new photograph hung among the others. Evan smiled from the frame, and somewhere deep in the house, something wearing his face knocked on a door, waiting to be let out. The forest began to snow without warning. One moment, Elias was following the familiar deer trail, muddy, leaf-choked, brown with rot, and the next, white flecks drifted down through the branches like falling ash. He stopped, breath-fogging, and looked up. The sky was wrong. Not gray, not storm-heavy, just blank. A pale, depthless ceiling, as if the world ended a few feet above the treetops. Snow in early autumn made no sense. The air wasn't cold enough, yet the flakes touched his jacket and did not melt. They stuck. Elias turned back the way he'd come. The path was already gone. Snow swallowed it, greedily, filling footprints as if they had never existed. The forest shifted in silence. No birds, no wind, no creak of branches. only the soft, constant hush of snow falling where snow should not be. He walked faster. The trees grew closer together the deeper he went, their trunks dark and slick, bark stretched tight like old skin. Snow clung to them in unnatural patterns, curling around knots and hollows, outlining shapes Elias didn't want to recognize. Faces, fingers, open mouths. He laughed once, sharp and brittle, just to hear something human. The sound died instantly, swallowed by the white. That was when he noticed the footprints. They were ahead of him. Bare feet, small, child-sized. They appeared one step at a time in the fresh snow, as if something invisible walked just beyond his sight. Each print pressed deep, far deeper than a child's weight should allow. "Hello?" Elias called. The footprints stopped. The snow kept falling. Then, slowly, the prints began again, this time turning off the trail, winding between the trees. Elias didn't follow at first. He stood there, heart pounding, telling himself every reasonable lie he could think of. Hypothermia, panic, animal tracks distorted by snow. But the forest felt expectant, waiting. When he finally stepped forward, the prints were already fading, filling in behind him as if the forest resented being marked. The temperature dropped all at once. Elias's breath crystallized in his lungs. His fingers went numb inside his gloves. Snow piled faster now, thick and heavy, pressing against his shoulders, his hood, his eyelashes. It whispered as it fell, not words, but something close, a sound that scraped against memory. He began to hear footsteps behind him, not crunching, sliding. He turned. Nothing. But when he faced forward again, the trees ahead were closer. Too close. The forest was tightening, drawing inward, branches knitting together overhead until the pale sky vanished entirely. Snow poured down from nowhere, burying roots, swallowing rocks, erasing depth. Elias stumbled into a clearing that should not have existed. At its center stood a cabin, half buried in snow, its windows black and open like empty eye sockets. The door hung ajar, gently tapping against the frame, though there was still no wind. The footprints led inside. The cabin was warmer than the forest. That terrified him more than the cold. The snow did not melt here either. It crept along the floor, climbing the walls, filling cracks, growing like mold. The air smelled old, wet, and faintly sweet. In the corner sat a figure, a child wrapped in a coat far too thin for winter, head bowed, hair stiff with frost. Snow fell from the ceiling and gathered on their shoulders, yet they did not shiver. "I'm lost," Elias said softly. The child looked up. Its face was wrong. Not empty, not monstrous, just unfinished. Features blurred, as if sculpted from snow and left in the sun too long. Its eyes were dark hollows, filled with falling flakes. "You followed," it said, its voice layered, many voices speaking at once. Most don't. "What are you?" Elias whispered. The child smiled, and snow poured from its mouth. "We are what stays," it said, "when warmth leaves, when paths vanish, when the forest is forgotten." The walls groaned. Snow surged faster, crawling up Elias's legs, heavy as wet cement. He tried to move, but the floor had frozen around his boots. Outside, he heard footsteps, hundreds of them, bare feet, coming closer. "You can stay too," the child said kindly. "The forest remembers those who don't escape." Snow filled Elias's mouth as he screamed, packing his throat, his lungs, his thoughts. The last thing he saw was the child dissolving into white, spreading outward, becoming everything. By morning, the forest stood quiet and green again. No snow, no cabin, just a deer trail, unmarked, and a faint depression in the earth, quickly filling with leaves, as if nothing had ever been there at all.